It wasn't a confession, but it wasn't a denial either. The moment Tamar Braxton spoke, the room shifted. Her words were careful, measured. But according to listeners watching closely, they did something far more powerful than a straight answer ever could. They confirmed what she no longer wanted to keep deflecting. This all came after Funky Dineva made a statement that reignited long-circulating rumors involving Mendeecees. Fans expected Tamar to shut it down immediately. Instead, she paused. She explained. She chose her words slowly. And in doing so, she left space where denial should have been. That silence spoke louder than anything else. Comment sections lit up within minutes. Screenshots were frozen. Clips replayed. People weren't asking if something happened anymore. They were asking why Tamar finally stopped saying no. Her tone wasn't defensive. It wasn't playful. It sounded resigned. Like someone who knew the narrative had reached a point where dodging it only made things worse. Because when rumors live for too long and denial disappears, what's left isn't proof. It's implication. And if Tamar's own words are being read as confirmation, then whatever happened didn't just resurface. It reached a point where silence was no longer an option. To understand why Tamar's recent words hit so hard, you have to look at how long these rumors have been trailing her and how carefully she's avoided giving them oxygen. For years, Tamar Braxton has lived under a microscope where every friendship, appearance, and interaction is dissected. She learned early that denying everything outright often makes speculation worse, so she chose deflection, humor, or silence instead. The name Mendeecees has surfaced repeatedly in gossip circles, often without clear origin or proof. Tamar never fully addressed it until now. Historically, she brushed off the talk as internet noise, refusing to dignify it with a response. That pattern of avoidance became her shield. Fans recognized it. Critics mocked it. But it worked until it didn't. Enter Funky Dineva. Funky's recent statement didn't introduce a new rumor. It reframed an old one with confidence. The way it was delivered, according to viewers, suggested insider certainty rather than speculation. That shift mattered. When commentary moves from "I heard" to "this happened," the person at the center is forced to choose. Deny clearly or explain carefully. Tamar chose explanation. Her emotional history explains why that choice was so loaded. Tamar has often said she feels misunderstood, accused of chaos when she's actually responding to pressure. Past controversies taught her that outright denial can be twisted, while over-explaining invites more questions. So when she finally spoke, she didn't say yes or no. She spoke about timing, context, feelings. And in doing so, she acknowledged something existed worth contextualizing. That's why people say she can't deny it anymore. Not because she confirmed details, but because she confirmed relevance. Emotionally, this moment sits at the intersection of exhaustion and control. Tamar has spent years pushing back against narratives she didn't create. According to those close to her, she's tired of pretending certain chapters never happened just to keep the peace. At the same time, she's deeply aware that any admission, however small, will be magnified beyond recognition. The backstory also involves trust. Tamar has hinted in the past that people she trusted spoke loosely, allowing rumors to grow legs. That betrayal, real or perceived, made her more guarded. So when Funky spoke with certainty, it likely felt like the final straw, forcing Tamar to reclaim the narrative before it was fully written without her. This emotional history is why her words sounded different this time. Less deflective, more resigned. Not because she wanted to confess, but because she no longer wanted to pretend the conversation was imaginary. Because when rumors survive years of denial, they stop being rumors. They become something you're expected to address, even if addressing them costs you your peace. That emotional weight set the stage for what followed, a moment where Tamar's attempt at control may have unintentionally confirmed more than she planned, and triggered a reaction she couldn't walk back. The main conflict erupted the moment Tamar's response was no longer read as damage control, but as confirmation by omission. Viewers weren't parsing what she said. They were listening for what she didn't say. After years of clean denials and playful deflection, the absence of a firm, no felt seismic. In public narratives, certainty is currency, and Tamar didn't spend it this time. According to reactions circulating online, the shift was immediate. Commentators replayed the clip frame by frame, isolating phrases, pauses, and tonal changes. They noted how Tamar spoke about timing and context instead of falsity. They noticed how she acknowledged the conversation rather than rejecting the claim. And that subtle pivot ignited the conflict. Had Tamar chosen to explain instead of deny because denial was no longer true, or because denial no longer helped? Fans split into camps. One side argued that explanation is not admission, that Tamar was reclaiming her story without validating rumor. The other side insisted the opposite, that once you stop denying, you've crossed an invisible line. In that reading, Tamar's words didn't prove anything concrete, but they confirmed relevance, and relevance is often enough to cement belief. The pressure intensified because Funky's statement changed the stakes. When a rumor is framed with confidence and proximity, delivered as something known rather than heard, the person at the center is cornered. A flat denial can sound defensive. Silence can sound guilty. Tamar chose a third path, nuance. And nuance online is dangerous. Here's where the first shocking twist landed. Insiders and longtime observers began pointing out that Tamar's response may have been strategic, not resigned. The twist wasn't that she couldn't deny anymore. It was that she chose not to, believing denial would only extend the life of the rumor. In this reading, Tamar recognized the moment had passed where a simple, "that never happened," would be believed. So she shifted the frame from whether to how it's being told. That reframing flips the narrative. If Tamar believed denial would fuel speculation, then explanation becomes containment. Not confession, containment. It's the difference between arguing facts and managing impact. By speaking about context without endorsing details, she may have been trying to shorten the story's lifespan rather than lengthen it. But strategy has consequences. The public rarely rewards restraint with restraint. Nuance was flattened into implication. Screenshots replaced sentences. And the conflict escalated because audiences felt empowered to decide what Tamar meant, even if she never said it. Behind the scenes, supporters suggested Tamar was exhausted. Years of rumor chasing had taught her that the internet doesn't wait for proof, it waits for posture. Her posture this time, calm, explanatory, non-denial, became the evidence others felt entitled to use. That's the paradox of public life. Control your tone, lose control of interpretation. The conflict deepened as the rumor's gravity shifted. It was no longer about whether something happened. It was about why Tamar had managed it this way for so long. People asked if she'd been protecting someone, protecting herself, or protecting timing. Each theory added weight, regardless of accuracy. And then the most unsettling realization surfaced. Even a denial now wouldn't reset the story. Once audiences decide a pause equals proof, the narrative locks. Tamar's words, intended to explain, had inadvertently become the hinge on which belief swung. Because in public storytelling, what you refuse to say can matter more than what you say out loud. The first shocking twist wasn't a revelation of facts. It was the recognition that Tamar's attempt at control may have confirmed the rumor's permanence, not its truth. With that realization, the story was primed to escalate further, drawing in outside voices, amplifying interpretations, and setting up a second twist where the question wouldn't be what happened, but who benefits from this version being believed? The escalation didn't come from a new interview or a leaked message. It came from momentum. Once Tamar's response was framed as confirmation by implication, the story began moving on its own. Commentary hardened into certainty. Certainty turned into timelines. Timelines turned into conclusions. And suddenly, a rumor that survived years on the fringe was being treated like settled history. Every phrase Tamar Braxton had spoken was lifted, shortened, and recirculated. Words meant to contextualize were recast as admissions. Pauses became signals. Calmness became guilt. The escalation showed how quickly nuance collapses when audiences believe they've caught someone slipping. Meanwhile, Funky Dineva's statement gained new authority, not because of evidence, but because Tamar didn't sweat it down. Clips of Funky's commentary were reposted with captions like, "She basically said it herself," even though she never did. The story no longer needed new input. It fed on repetition. Then attention shifted sharply to Mendeecees. His silence became the loudest sound in the room. Without a response from him, people projected motives and meanings. Some read dignity into the quiet. Others read avoidance. The escalation thrived on absence, each non-statement widening the interpretive gap. The world reacted around them. Podcasts debated what Tamar meant. Comment sections declared verdicts. Side-by-side clips from different years were stitched together to suggest patterns that may or may not exist. The story became participatory. Everyone felt invited to help solve it. And then came the second major twist. Insiders began suggesting that the real shift wasn't Tamar confirming anything. It was the public deciding it no longer needed confirmation. The twist was realizing the narrative had crossed a threshold where belief no longer waited for facts. Once Tamar stopped denying and started explaining, audiences felt licensed to conclude. The story didn't escalate because of new information. It escalated because interpretation replaced evidence. That realization reframed everything. Tamar's words didn't change the truth. They changed permission. Permission to believe. Permission to repeat. Permission to decide the story's ending without the people involved. In that environment, even a later denial would sound like backtracking. The escalation took an emotional toll. Supporters worried that Tamar's attempt to be thoughtful had backfired. Critics argued she should have been clearer. Both sides agreed on one thing: the internet doesn't reward ambiguity. It consumes it. Behind the scenes, observers noted how quickly the conversation stopped being about events and became about credibility. Who sounds confident? Who sounds calm? Who looks tired? Those impressions became proxies for truth. And once credibility becomes the battlefield, facts struggle to keep up. The second twist landed fully when people recognized a chilling truth. The story had become bigger than the people in it. Tamar's posture, Funky's framing, Mendeecees' silence. Each piece mattered less than the collective conclusion forming online. The escalation was self-sustaining. Because when audiences believe they've decoded subtext, they stop listening for clarification. And once belief solidifies without proof, every future word is filtered through a verdict already reached. With the narrative now moving faster than any response could catch it, the stage was set for fallout, where emotions would harden, relationships would strain, and the consequences of implication would settle in long after the headlines moved on. By now, the fallout wasn't explosive, it was suffocating. The story had moved past headlines and into emotional residue, the kind that clings long after the clips stop trending. For Tamar Braxton, the weight came from watching her attempt at nuance turn into a verdict she never delivered. Friends say the hardest part wasn't criticism, it was the feeling that her words were no longer hers once they hit the internet. Public reactions split sharply. One side argued Tamar finally stopped pretending, reading honesty into her calm tone and careful phrasing. The other side insisted the internet was projecting guilt where there was only restraint. What both sides shared was certainty, and certainty, once claimed, rarely invites reconsideration. Comment sections filled with conclusions, not questions. The fallout also reshaped how Funky Dineva was perceived. Supporters praised him for calling it, while critics accused him of framing rumor as fact. Regardless of intent, his statement gained gravity because Tamar didn't sweat it down. In public discourse, confidence plus silence often equals credibility, even when that equation is flawed. Then there was Mendeecees. His continued quiet became a Rorschach test. To some, it signaled maturity and refusal to engage in gossip. To others, it felt like strategic distance. The absence of a response didn't cool the story. It fueled it. Each day, without comment became another reason for people to fill the gap with their own assumptions. Emotionally, the toll showed in tone rather than statements. Observers noted Tamar growing more guarded, less reactive, an indication not of defeat, but of boundaries being drawn. When public narratives harden, engagement can feel like pouring fuel on a fire. Silence, at that point, becomes self-preservation. The fallout spread beyond the principals. Fans argued with fans. Podcasters debated podcasters. Old clips were reinterpreted with new captions. What once felt like a single rumor turned into a referendum on how public figures are allowed to respond to speculation at all. Is a denial required every time? Is explanation a trap? Is silence a sin? The emotional center of the fallout wasn't proof, it was trust. Trust between speaker and audience. Trust that nuance would be respected. That trust eroded quickly. And once eroded, even clarification struggled to rebuild it. Because fallout isn't about what happened. It's about what people believe happened and how those beliefs linger. With emotions settled into camps and interpretations calcified, the story edged toward its final turn, where the consequences of implication would meet a choice: escalate again, or let the uncertainty stand. The final twist didn't come from a receipt, a leaked message, or a surprise interview. It came from something far more unsettling. Nothing was corrected. As days passed, Tamar Braxton didn't return to clarify, didn't circle back to deny, and didn't try to reset the narrative. And that absence became the loudest statement of all. Not because it proved anything, but because it allowed the version already forming to harden without resistance. Here's the twist that reframed everything. Tamar may not have stopped denying because she can't. She may have stopped because denial no longer works once a rumor reaches cultural consensus. In public life, there's a moment when saying that's not true doesn't erase belief, it amplifies it. Once that line is crossed, silence becomes strategy, not surrender. For Funky Dineva, the moment carried unexpected weight. His statement, initially debated, now stood largely uncontested. Not validated, but unchallenged. In the court of public opinion, that distinction barely matters. The narrative doesn't need confirmation when it feels complete. And then there's Mendeecees, still silent. His quiet keeps the story suspended, neither confirmed nor resolved. Every day without a response extends the cliffhanger. Is the silence dignified distance or careful avoidance? The truth may never be clarified publicly, and that uncertainty has become part of the story itself. The chilling realization is this: even if the truth were spoken tomorrow, it might not change what people believe today. Once implication replaces evidence, narratives become resistant to correction. Tamar's words didn't end the rumor. They may have marked the point where it no longer needed her participation to survive. So the cliffhanger isn't about what happened. It's about what happens next. Will Tamar ever choose to deny plainly and risk reigniting the fire? Will Funky double down or step back? Will Mendeecees speak and shift the story in a way no one expects? Or will this remain one of those moments in pop culture where ambiguity becomes the ending and everyone lives with their chosen interpretation? Because some stories don't close. They pause, right at the moment when silence becomes the most powerful line of dialogue. Now it's your turn. This story isn't just about rumors. It's about how narratives are formed when denial fades and interpretation takes over. In today's media landscape, silence can speak as loudly as confession, and explanation can be mistaken for admission. So ask yourself, when someone stops denying, does that mean they're confirming or protecting themselves? At what point does public curiosity cross into entitlement? And should silence be respected as a boundary or challenged as avoidance? There's no single right answer, but how we engage with stories like this matters. Commentary can harden assumptions. Repetition can turn speculation into truth. And once that happens, even the people at the center lose control of their own narrative. Drop your thoughts in the comments, respectfully. Are you reading Tamar's words as confirmation, or as exhaustion with a rumor that won't die? Do you think Funky went too far, or simply said what others wouldn't? And should Mendeecees finally speak, or is silence the smarter move? If you want more breakdowns that stay focused on the title, center the real people involved, and unpack viral moments without turning them into chaos, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this story may be quiet right now, but unresolved narratives have a way of resurfacing when no one expects them to.